Welcome to the SoundWorks Collection. I'm Michael Coleman. In this conversation, we're talking with composer Finneas O'Connell from the Apple TV Plus show Disclaimer. You might know Finneas from his work with his sister Billie Eilish. You might know Finneas from his work on his own album. He just recently released Crying Out Loud around the same time that Disclaimer came out back in October of 2024. We're going to dive into a bunch of different aspects of working on a show with director Alfonso Cuarón. But I'm really excited to have a co-host on this conversation, my longtime friend and collaborator, Logan Gourmet from Vibe Machine. Welcome, Logan.
Thank you for having me.
You and I have been talking about wanting to talk with Finneas for a long time, and now that we've had this opportunity, what is it like? Like, how would you describe it?
Well, Finneas is a pretty easy person to talk to. He's a very, he's a normal person like all of us, but he's also has a magic ability to create music that resonates deeply with people across the entire planet. And so listening to his ideas and his ways of approaching that is like super cool, and just it's really awesome to see how relatable and inspiring it is to hear someone that makes music for all different types of mediums and how he approaches that.
Yeah, I think the challenge that we have is we know too much, or we think we know too much, or when you think you know too much about the process, and then when you start asking people, what is your process? And they start describing it to you, it seems so obvious sometimes. And that's what I really like and appreciate about this conversation is that we have an opportunity to look at something that's pretty complex. He's working with a quartet here, doing some string arrangements, which are pretty complex and emotionally dense. I started this conversation asking him about his influence, even the inspiration to think about being a composer, and how Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross's score for The Social Network, inspired him, gave him that seed of an idea to become a composer on a show like Disclaimer.
I think the short answer is I always have loved, from my earliest memories of film are pretty tied to my earliest memories of film score. The two examples I would give as a real child would be the Howard Shore scores for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then I'm forgetting his name right now, but the composer for My Neighbor Totoro. I think the music in Totoro is jaw-dropping good. Logan is beaming, so I'm assuming Logan.
The melody in that is just so spot on. When my daughter listens to that, watches it, I'm just like, this hits so hard every single time this melody comes.
That's the best. It's such an amazing piece of music. But again, those are, as a child, the first memories I have of loving films were very interwoven with loving the score. So I kind of always thought about it. And then, Billy and I've had opportunities to do these film projects. So in 2018, we did this piece of music for an Apple commercial for their holiday commercials, all this kind of cool claymation looking commercial. And I wrote that piece of music to picture. That was a minute and 30-second spot, and I had to write a song where the verse would play right until this change happened. And we booked the gig, which was great, and then we did the James Bond theme song a year after that, and that was this amazing dream come true thing. So James Bond meant that we got to go work with Hans Zimmer, and that was a treat. And I've just kind of always admired it so much, and then once I started getting offers, I was like, oh, I'm going to say yes to these offers. So the first two people to offer me, work, so to speak, were Megan Park, who made The Fallout, and BJ Novak, who made Vengeance. And again, it's really gutsy to offer a person who doesn't do something a job, I really could have blown it. So I shout out to those two people. And Alfonso too. Alfonso, all three of those people offered me composing work before I had done any of the other composing work. I kind of sort of got all three jobs lined up and then did them. And so I was sort of sight unseen for everything. And Alfonso's sanguine take was I was I've never, scored anything before. And he was like, I've never made TV. He was like, this will be great. And I was like, okay, if you're cool with it, yeah, shout out giving somebody, their first job. It's really cool.
I think of Catherine's theme and the cello and how you explore that, the melody lines that in her theme to me are so haunting. And when you revisit them and the story unfolds, so talk about just the idea of exploring character and obviously Catherine's theme.
I think Disclaimer more so than the two films I've scored, partially because of scope. You know, the films are 90 minutes to 120 minutes and you watch them in one sitting. And a TV show, you know, the episodes of Disclaimer came out week to week. So, you know, unless you watched it after it had all come out, nobody was watching it in one sitting. I think the most exciting thing was right from the very inception of it, from reading the scripts, all of the characters were written. There was a sort of a thing at the beginning that said every character will be shot in their own distinct way. And each character's sort of coverage, so to speak, was like written in different colored ink. So it'd be like, these are these Robert scenes and they're written in blue ink. And then it would go to Catherine scenes and they'd be written in pink ink. And the Italy vignettes would be written in green ink. So you'd always kind of be reminded that these were really different narratives. And the music, Alfonso was really married to the idea of the music being delineated similarly. So like Robert's coverage all has this sort of synthy, subby world that's like not present at all in Catherine's world, right? Catherine's world is like mainly cello and like violin harmonics. Sometimes it's like full quartet, but it's mostly cello. And then the Italy vignettes are these like sort of Baroque styling things of this love theme that I wrote, but all played on like lutes and, like harpsichord. And that was like a super sort of, you know, we weren't trying to be saccharine, but we were happy for it to be saccharine, I guess. You know what I mean? It was like, that was sort of the feeling. And so I think the thing that became the really exciting thing was like all of the whole of Disclaimer, and I think the whole of many great TV shows is like the intersection of these things. So you're like, okay, so episode like chapter 1 and chapter 2 are like, you're kind of hearing like theme and theme and theme and theme and theme. And then by like episode 3, some of the themes have like warped and turned into the other themes, and they all just kind of wove together like a strand of DNA. And that became like the really exciting challenge. By the time you get to chapters 3 and then chapter 4, we have all the ocean rescue stuff, and there's themes playing in a way that you've not heard them yet. And then the scenes in the final couple episodes at the hospital, where Stephen's theme has evolved, and then Catherine's theme is woven into Stephen's theme. It was all just these kind of like finding ways to connect two separate pieces of thread. It's really fun.
I want to call out, this one from episode 2, Where Else Do You Touch Her, which is this moment of the my first reaction was, at first I thought it was Billy, and I was like, it can't be Billy. It wasn't Billy, but it is your writing. And so, and it's also non-lyrical in terms of the melody that she's singing. So talk to me about introducing this vocal idea, because it is a perfect complement to what's going on in that scene.
So that melody, that was like the first melodic thing that existed on its own that stuck, right? I sort of would write tons of stuff and present them to Alfonso. That was many of them, he was like, cool, but not right for this. And that was the first one where he was like, I think this is like the love theme. I was like, great. And it plays many times, right? You hear that same melody played by the quartet in that kind of Baroque gondola sequence in the first episode. And so I loved the idea of having a vocalist sing it during those those dinner sequences and the love scenes in episode 2 and 3. And I just felt like, the other thing that was exciting about it was it almost feels like a pop song, right? But you have this kind of like, if we were sourcing a pop song, if we were finding a song that was pre-existing, it wouldn't be the melody that you'd heard you know what I mean? Like we would have had to commission it. And so there was this kind of like, oh, we've written a kind of a pop song, but it has the melodic sort of ID of the rest of the show. So that was a really fun experience.
I mean, do you have to stop yourself from making things turn into pop songs, especially like with Disclaimer?
I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I think, I would argue that like the great film and TV scores of the last 10 years kind of are pop songs, like Succession themes, kind of a pop song, White Lotus themes, kind of a pop song. Like this Challenger soundtrack was literally like some pop songs, like they crushed. So I'm happy to do that. I will say that like Alfonso is very, not a heavy-handed man in any sort of respect, and pieces being overly melodic he'd shy away from unless it was like a moment that really merited it. He really wanted tone and vibe. He's a vibe guy, famous vibe guy. So yeah, there were times where I'd write sort of a chordal thing. It's a piece like My Wife's Cardigan, and it's like these just sort of like chords flowing, and then I'd write like a melody line on top of it, and he'd be like, "Oh, I love the chords. Like, we're just gonna go chords." And you're like, "Great, like that's cool," But I like that approach.
Feels like melody, strong melody is the thing that I can always, and I think regardless if people realize it, that is this through line through all the different work that you do. And I'm curious to your approach as far as how you treat melody when it's, for instance, writing a song and the melody is tailoring towards like a vocal, like beneath it, versus you creating music that's working for telling a story, or like supporting somebody else's vision with their story.
So far, and again, you could talk to another composer who's had more experience than me and they could super disagree with me. But my observation about film score is like there's two scenarios. There's like your piece of music playing over something without any dialogue, right? A scene of a character doing something and traveling through some environment or sitting down and thinking something. And then the music really gets a kind of an opportunity to be the sort of lead guitar, so to speak. And then if you're the sort of under, the bed beneath two great actors having, a scene with great dialogue, like you're the house band underneath the soloists, which are them. So I would sort of say like that's, I work on, when I'm working to picture specifically, like I'll do two different ways. I'll like, start with the with the dialogue on, if it's a scene with dialogue, and I'll just play with the dialogue. So I know that it's not like too rhythmically conflicting. If they're talking and it sounds like this, and then I'm doing some instrumental that's like, like, and it's too, like your brain kind of can't pick it all out. So I'll just see how it feels with the rhythm of the actual dialogue. And then once I'm like, okay, these feel kind of good, then I'll mute the, dialogue for 10 minutes and work on the piece of music so I can really just hear it and focus on like the musicality of it. But I sort of feel like unless I'm doing a scene that's got no dialogue, it's like it has to be like the beat underneath the rapper, so to speak.
How is that different if you're creating a melody in a song? How does that change? Because that's where you traditionally come from. So how is that different from that?
I mean, the difference is that you're dealing with the singer, right? Like I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like, I didn't write the dialogue that Cate Blanchett is saying I didn't tell her the rhythm to say it at, like that. I'm receiving that. So it's like, if I'm coming up with a piece of music and then Billy and I are working on the melody and the lyrics, like we're navigating that ourselves. But I guess like that's what I mean is like I think of dialogue as like a melodic component, even though it's basically only rhythm, but I think of it as melody.
Also, Finneas, is just the reality of you were working on Disclaimer and your album Crying Out Loud, and they came out both in October of last year. When I was hearing you talk about how during the day you'd be splitting your time between your album and maybe even Billy's album and Disclaimer, but when I listened to I think like the track, the first track, Starfucker, the bridge section to me, when I start hearing the string arrangements, I'm like, I feel like the little Disclaimer made its way into.
Yeah.
So like, talk to me about just like living in that bubble of thinking about Disclaimer, but also working on your own album.
Yeah, it's very true. I was working on Billy's album and Disclaimer at the same time. And I try not to work on Billy's music at the same time as I work on my own solo projects because I don't want them to bleed into each other. I really love the world that Billy occupies. But Disclaimer is so different inherently than the album Billy and I were making that I was like, I'll do these at the same time. That's fine. But it totally, inspired me. First of all, I had to learn how to write parts for like orchestral parts. And I had such a kind of an abstract, like over the years, I've had like a violinist come in, like Madison Leinster played the violins on the beginning of the Billy song Lovely. And then like Matt Dunkley did the string arrangement for the James Bond song. And so I was like, oh, this is an amazing 70-piece, but I wasn't delineating like quartet, octet, 70-piece orchestra solo. I just sort of was like thinking like strings. So this gave me a really clear delineation of like, oh, this is how a quartet sounds. This is how you write parts for a quartet. That, Billy and I were, the albums that we were inspired by when we were working on Hit Me Hard and Soft were like, Sgt. Pepper and Viva La Vida and any albums that have these kind of like motifs and themes and overtures. And so, it's like going to college for a year working on Disclaimer. I had all this sort of like understanding of how to write a string overture. So once we had the melody and the greatest, I wanted to put strings on it. And then I'd been working with the Ataka Quartet on Disclaimer, and I was like, these are the best string players I've ever worked with. We gotta, have them play on Hit Me Hard and Soft. So yeah, I mean, it was beautiful that I got to sort of take what I'd learned in one area and then help my other area out with it. I don't think, for what it's worth, I don't think anything I've ever made helped me with Disclaimer. That was so outside of my, sort of world of knowledge that it was really uncharted territory for me, which was exciting. But I did immediately then take all that with me into what I do with Billy.
TV and film is relentless in terms of the schedule. There is a deadline. I think maybe with your own album, you can maybe tell the record label, like, we'll let you know when it's done. Like, you can kind of drive that timeline. How would you describe just your overall feeling of being under pressure? Like you said, treading into territory that you've never done. Like, how did that help you grow as an artist now that you've had some space from, this experience?
It was overwhelming. I mean, the thing that was overwhelming about it, and I find this true, I'm working on another scoring thing right now. The thing that's always overwhelming about it is just how many different balls are in the air. You're simultaneously working on like anywhere from like 25 to like 70 pieces. So that is the quantity is overwhelming. There's never like I think one of the great things about any kind of work is like when you know that you checked off the box and you're like, all right, I did that work and I can close my laptop and go outside. And I think like the way I always feel in the middle of a scoring job is like, I could just work another 12 hours straight right now. Like there's enough work existing that I could just not see the sunlight for months and months. I'm really satisfied by finishing work. I love the sort of feeling of having accomplished something. And I think the film score thing of like, you don't feel like you're finished until it's like so done, until it's like off your plate and submitted and mixed or something. So I think you have to kind of let go of that feeling. You have to let go of like, oh wow, I'm doing it right now. Or like, working on pieces of music and you're like, I'm not going to feel done with this until like I can't work on it anymore. And there's a sort of a challenge there, but it's also like, I will say that like, because I just went through a period of not having a project, and like, it's kind of awesome that you always could do work. Like it sort of makes you feel like if you're not working, you're really taking some me time. Like sometimes, like I don't like being bored. I think that's what I'm really trying to say is I don't really like being bored. So working on a TV project, you're like, listen, if I'm, if it's a Friday night and my girlfriend is, traveling for work or something and my friends are busy and like, what am I going to do with my Friday night? I'm like, oh, I can do my work. Like there's always like something you can go do. So I like that feeling.
My world is just like heavily dialed in and focused on melody. That's my absolute favorite thing. And I love like there's so many melodies that you've written that have taught me a lot. And I think have taught a lot of other people, but it's not something I ever hear anybody ask you about. And I'm like curious about that because it's clearly something that is really important to you. And the taking of a melody and leaning into it and saying, yeah, this is a strong melody and we're going to sing this a million times in this song and it's going to be great. And it's going to be reharmonized. We're going to change the lyrics. We're going to ride through this. And I feel like melody is this unsung hero in so much music, just music in general. It's not a question that's even asked. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably part of the reason I haven't talked about it ad nauseum is that like, I don't have a super mathematic relationship with it. I mean, to me, all melody is rhythm. Ponder that, think that over. Like that's how a melody works, is it's rhythm. So I really think of it as this sort of two-sided thing, but I treat them both the same. There's sometimes I'll be like, oh, I love the rhythm of that, but we should change the order of the notes or whatever. But a lot of the time it's really just this kind of homogenous thing. I think that, we like the over intellectualization of music I've watched be the downfall of so many talented musicians, and so I really try to sort of like anytime anybody is telling me why something I don't like is good, I'm like, well, you can think it's good, but like I'm not gonna. Here's a very goofy example, and I like this song, so I don't think I don't. But like the song's Still Crazy After All These Years by Paul Simon. He was like, oh, I fit every note in the chromatic scale into that song. That was like the tip he was on. And he's like, and there's that one note in the bridge where he goes like, what is it? And he was like, yeah, that was really hard to fit. I had to like, reharm this thing. And like, that song's great, but like that thing, if he had fun doing it, fabulous. But like, I don't listen to that song and go, I like that song. And then somebody goes like, he used every note in the chromatic scale. And I'm like, oh my God, I like it 10 times more now. Like, I just have the relationship I have with it, I guess is what I'm saying. So, I don't know, little things. It's funny when you learn the names of stuff. Like, do you know the millennial whoop, which is like the 4-note, like Billy's song Blues. That's all millennial whoop. Like all the Katy Perry, Kesha, what's that? Oh, like all that 2010s pop. That's all millennial whoop, which is like I think it's a perfect fourth, back and forth on a woo. But again, it's like, it's kind of funny that that's diagnosed, that has a name, that you can do it or not. But it's like, does it feel good? Nobody's like, dude, we should do one of those millennial whoops in this song. They're just doing it. It just feels right or it doesn't.
I haven't heard about the millennial whoop. So I'm gonna throw you. This is so funny that you bring this up. So there's a term that Logan talks about a lot, of the underlick, and something that you talked about. So what does that mean to you? Because does it mean anything to you? Because I feel like you said like melody. It's not. Melody is rhythm to you. But I feel like there's concepts and ideas that you kind of wrap your arms around that is part of your process. So
Logan, I would define underlick as a melodic, repeated element of the song that is not a part of the lead vocals, lyric, or melody. Was that far off from how you define underlick? Is that not the way you describe it?
With an underlick, the root notes are a huge component to an underlick working, because it creates the movement, right? It creates the reharmonization of the melody within it, and that's where like that's the sauce, which is something that you were talking about how music not being mathematical, but at the same time, there's many things that you use in your music that are, there's internal repetition that you use much more than just like, standard songwriter person. There's like 100,000 songs released every day, but many things that are incorporated into your music are much more pattern based. I mean, like there's so many components, but the patterns used melodically in an underlick or in the top line melody are, they're repeated, and it's amazing, and they sound incredible that way.
Talking about space, when I'm listening to, I was listening to the cue for like the Venice gondola ride, contrasted with probably what's it going to take to break your heart. When you think about reverb and space and your use of storytelling through that space, I was just kind of like fascinated listening, once again, comparing two separate pieces of your work. But can you just, basically the question I want to ask you is, how do you think about space and how reverb and the closeness play into that storytelling aspect, especially when it comes to a show like Disclaimer, because there is a closeness and a proximity that plays into a lot of the cues, but then I see how you play with it like and crying out loud. And it was really fun to see the two different worlds.
Well, thanks. First of all of these questions from both of you, really thoughtful and, clear that you guys are very technically skilled and I appreciate you taking any time to listen to this stuff. So thank you, first of all. I guess to me, space, like the James Blake and I are buddies, and I haven't seen him in a long time now. We've just been in different places in the world. He's like one of those people where I'm like, thought of you, where are you? And he's like, London for 6 months. But in 2019 and 20 and 21, we saw a lot of each other. And we always would joke that like the number one compliment James Blake gets, that's what he tells me, is like, oh, you use space so much. And he always was like, that's such a funny compliment, because the compliment is like, I like how little you do. But I do think that like I just love minimalism. I love minimalism when I hear it. I love minimalism when I feel it. I love a room with a chair and a coffee table and almost nothing else and a beautiful floor lamp. Like I love the, I would never, ever call myself a maximalist. My wardrobe's like 4 shirts. Yeah, I mean, musically, like I'm always trying to see how few legs the table can stand on.
What defines something musically as being strong? Is it how it lives in your memory? Is it something that you let stick with you? A lot of these, some of these themes they're decades old, but then also, you're creating music now that will live on into the future. You're creating for the future. How do you approach that, working on the show versus working on your own music, and how you sort of decide that something is memorable?
I try to just get out of my own way in the real making of stuff. I kind of like, I think if you think of creating something as like trying to, like you open the door into a room and there's no lights on, and you walk into the dark room and you try to find light sources and turn them on, try to find, little lamps, switch those on, try to find the big light, turn that on. Like you just kind of fumble around and do that. And then once you light everything up, then you can see how it is, you can see what's there. But your job really is to like find the light. And in retrospect, you know if something's good or not. And sometimes you get fooled. Sometimes working on something for a long time makes you think it's bad or good or something. But I think I just try not to worry about like is this melody gonna last forever or something like that. I just try to make things, and if I'm the one making them, then I'm doing my job, which is to just create things from nothing, and then time will decide if it's good or bad. I think, like, I always try to tell people, I'm like, people let go of your bad stuff. I mean, try not to spend all your money on an idea in case it's a bad idea.
Thanks so much for listening to our conversation with Finneas O'Connell. You can check out Disclaimer on Apple TV Plus. It's streaming now. There's 7 episodes. It is a wonderful, intense show, and I think you really enjoy it. We want to thank our friends at Apple for providing some of the music from Finneas's soundtrack. You can check that out. It's streaming on all the platforms. I also want to thank Logan. Thanks for jumping in and being part of this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you guys on the next one. Many thanks to our guests today, and if you'd like to listen to more conversations from the SoundWorks collection, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on all major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube. You can also find exclusive daily video clips on our Instagram and TikTok pages, and connect with other creatives around the world through our email industry mailing list at soundworkscollection.com. If you have a story or project that you want to propose for the show, please send us an email at info@soundworkscollection.com. And thanks again for listening.